I want to welcome everybody. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming out to the Labor Temple today. If everyone could find their seats and join us here. My name is Jesse Hagopian. I teach ethnic studies at Garfield High School here in Seattle. And I'm a member of the Seattle Education Association, the Social Equity Educators, and I'm an editor for Rethinking Schools magazine as well. And I want to begin by giving some shout outs to folks that made this forum possible. I want to say thank you to the King County Labor Council, and yeah, give it up. Hosting this wonderful event. I want to thank the Seattle Education Association for their support in putting on this important forum. Thank you to our sponsors who made this event possible, the Social Equity Educators, the Oklahoma Teachers United, Arizona Educators United. Give it up for them. And to endorsing organizations, the International Socialist Organization, Jacobin, Socialist Alternative, the Democratic Socialists of America. And I want to thank everyone who is live streaming this all over the country or even the world who are hungry for these lessons that we are going to go through today. And it's my honor to facilitate this powerful forum of educators from around the country who are engaging in an unprecedented strike wave in my lifetime, something that is energizing the labor movement and revitalizing struggle in our country. And to get a sense of how this labor movement has been revitalized, you just have to look at what happened yesterday. If you saw what happened yesterday in Kentucky, hundreds of teachers walked out of classes and shut down over 20 school districts around the state, and they rallied at the state capitol. Did you guys hear what they chanted at the state capitol? They chanted shame, that's appropriate. But they also chanted West Virginia, West Virginia, West Virginia, right? One teacher was carrying a sign at the Capitol that said, "Don't make us go all West Virginia on you." Right? So West Virginia has become a rallying cry for a growing strike wave across this nation that's remaking the labor movement and showing the world the power of rank and file workers. And I think West Virginia educators have taught us all how to struggle and how to win from their 9-day strike, right? They were told to go back. They didn't. They held out until they got the 5% raise that they deserved. And I think that now teachers around the country are incorporating this sort of fight the power lesson plan into their daily lives and their curriculum. And I think after the successful West Virginia strike ended, we just saw this thing roll out. Right? We saw it in Jersey City, New Jersey. Educators going on strike before a new contract ended. And then in Arizona, teachers held a teach-in at the state capitol in Phoenix on March 28th that drew thousands, over 5,000 educators as part of a continuing mobilization to fight for higher pay, for better health insurance, smaller class sizes, and against school privatization. And now in Oklahoma, we're seeing this being taken to the next level. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, Oklahoma teachers have the lowest average salary in the country. And additionally, in recent district survey of more than 2,000 certified staff members, 53% of Oklahoma teachers reported having a second job, right, to make ends meet. I heard about one teacher who was a baggage claim handler working before and after school to try to make ends meet. This is the reality. And in that situation, you have a state representative in Oklahoma named Jeff Cody who has the unmitigated gall to call teachers this was in a recorded question and answer with Oklahoma students. He called teachers extortionists, stating that the demands for funding, quote, aren't noble. So it's not noble to be able to afford to pay your rent. It's not noble to be able to feed your families and make ends meet. The teachers there had a very clear message that they were willing to go all West Virginia, and that threat of a strike has already produced a $6,100 wage increase by the Oklahoma legislature that was scared of the power of the organized workers. And the predominantly Republican-held legislature moved quickly to enact taxes that they never thought they would be proposing to make this happen. I just want to say, in case you thought that not being able to afford to provide for your families was just a Southern problem for educators, we don't have to go farther than our own state here in Washington State to know that this is a problem that afflicts the entire country and the world's richest nation. NPR just ran a story that shows that teacher pay in Washington State ranks 44th in the nation when adjusted for inflation. And we have a state legislature here that is not just morally out of step with paying educators, they're actually legally out of compliance with the state constitution and have been found guilty by the state Supreme Court for failing to fully fund public education in this state. And so I think that the teachers here who are going to be listening to the lessons of teachers in West Virginia, who are going to be listening to teachers in Arizona and in Oklahoma, aren't just providing solidarity, important solidarity for them. I think we're going to be listening here today with an ear for strategy and tactics as we go about our own organizing effort to demand the schools that teachers and students deserve right here in Washington State. So I just want to wrap up by saying that I think we face a basic problem in this country that is exemplified by the fact that there are 5 people in the world today that have the same amount of wealth as the bottom 3.5 billion people on the planet, right? I think that that statistic, that basic reality is a driver in this inequality that's produced situations where teachers have to take second jobs, where schools are crumbling, and where we have to organize collectively to fight back. When you have 5 individuals who can hoard that much wealth, right, we're going to have problems with education and healthcare and all the services that we deserve. And I want to make it clear that one number is not independent of the other. It's not that there just happens to be 5 people with that much wealth and the other half of the planet has to make do and scrape by with the rest. It's that half of the planet doesn't have the money they need because those 5 people have so much, right? And so often we're told that's the way it works, there's nothing you can do about it, and now all we have to do is say West Virginia, right? Because we know that there is an alternative, and that's what these educators all over the country know. And that's why I'm really excited to introduce you to our panel today. We have educator here in Seattle, Tracy Castro-Gill from Denny International Middle School, a member of the Seattle Education Association and of the Social Equity Educators, a leader in the fight for ethnic studies here in our district. Give it up. We have Peter Hasegawa. We are very fortunate to have Peter here, the organizing director from the Martin Luther King County Labor Council. Give it up. And on cue, coming in the building, is our own president of the Seattle Education Association, Phyllis Campano, the president of Washington State's largest educators union. Welcome, Phyllis. You want to go ahead? Thank you, Phyllis. And with us via live stream, we are so fortunate to have Nicole McCormick, a pre-K music teacher and member of the West Virginia Education Association from Athens, West Virginia in Mercer County. Thank you so much for being with us. We are also so fortunate to have Rebecca Garelli, a 7th grade science and math teacher at Sevilla in West Phoenix. Please give it up. And we have Larry Cage, a high school English teacher from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and founder of Oklahoma Teachers United. And we know that even though they received that wage promise and increase, that they're getting ready to organize and go out on strike for the larger increase that they deserve. And so I'm so excited to bring this panel to you. And we are going to start with our Seattle-based panelists, and then we're going to move across the country. So I want to welcome our first speaker, Tracy Castro-Gill, to the podium. Thank you.
I was asked to come here today and talk about what solidarity means to me. And we were just talking before we got started about how educators are in a unique position to not only have solidarity with other educators and other labor organizations, but also with the communities that we serve, the students and the families. And so I'm really going to talk about that because I feel like here in Seattle, we've had a lot of success with that, and we're continuing to build on that solidarity with our communities. And so I want to talk about that. But first I want to say we're here for several reasons. The political climate right now, labor is under attack in our country. Public education is under attack in our country. People and communities of color are under attack in our country. And so we're here to show solidarity with all three of those groups: labor organizations, education, and communities of color. And we're here to show solidarity with the 150,000 workers that are about to strike in Oklahoma. And so we're creating this space for educators to organize and learn from one another and share stories of solidarity and success that we've had with that. We want to learn from West Virginia, like Jesse was talking about. You know, maybe we need to go West Virginia here in Washington to get our education fully funded and to be compliant with the Supreme Court. And so we've recently started a Facebook group, Washington Educators United. So share that with your friends and have other educators join that. And we can start organizing and talking about the possibility of doing just that. And also that's a way for us to show solidarity with the other groups that are going on strike also. So I feel like, especially as educators, solidarity with our communities is essential. So labor unions are for working class people. Does it matter if they're actually in a labor union? And in education, so much of what we do is public perception. When we went on strike in Seattle, one of the biggest organizations that came out of that was Soup for Teachers, which is a community organization that came out to the schools, provided support in terms of food and coffee, which was really helpful, coffee in the morning while we were striking. But they continue to be an organizing group that organizes families and communities around supporting public education, around putting pressure on the legislature to fully fund education. And so the fact that we worked so closely with the community helped us in our cause when we were bargaining. Solidarity with communities of color is important. We see charter schools popping up all over Washington, and the groups that they target the most frequently are communities of color. I don't blame families of color as a person of color myself for families taking their kids out of public schools and putting them in charter schools, because we're failing our students of color right now. So racial equity has to be a component of bargaining if we're going to have solidarity with our communities of color. We work for our communities. We should work equitably for our communities and make sure that the communities that need us most are the best served. Some of the wins we had in our strike in Seattle around racial equity was the creation of racial equity teams. We now have 43 schools in Seattle Public Schools that have a racial equity team whose job it is to educate their teachers, educate their educators in the building about what racial equity means, about how to close disproportionate discipline, disproportionate achievement, disproportionate graduation rates. And we are going to, in our next bargaining session, push for more of those racial equity teams and push for more support for the existing teams. Another thing we learned prior to the strike is that schools that are predominantly students of color had less recess time than schools that were predominantly white. And the reason a lot of times was they need more rigor in these schools. And so they there wasn't time for recess and play. And so one of the things that we demanded during our strike was equitable recess, making sure that our schools in the communities of color had the same opportunities as schools in mostly white communities. We continue to focus on racial equity in the Seattle Education Association. Recently, the Center for Race and Equity was formed, and I'm part of that organization. And it's a way to foster teacher leaders who organize for racial equity. One of the biggest wins, and what I'm part of, is creating K through 12 ethnic studies program in Seattle Public Schools, and the Center for Race and Equity played a big part in that. We were able to organize educators, recruit educators to help us in that movement. We also collaborated with the NAACP. So again, solidarity with the community has really helped us create the perception that we are working for our communities of color. One example of that is at our rep assembly, there was unanimous support for ethnic studies. And that led to a school board resolution with unanimous support for ethnic studies in Seattle Public Schools. And so we're going to try to keep riding that wave of racial equity and wins for our community and showing solidarity with our community in our upcoming bargaining session to ask for more racial equity teams and ethnic studies. And I think I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to welcome Phyllis Campano, the president of the Seattle Education Association. Thanks.
So first of all, thank you for inviting me to be here. I appreciate it. Tracy covered a lot of the one part of the 2015 strike. So what I'll do is kind of cover the importance of solidarity around that and the organizing piece. And I just want to say congratulations, and I'm super excited that Tracy is now on the SEA Board of Directors. So the importance of solidarity, I think we truly saw it in the bargain and in 2015 strike. We started out that bargain by reaching out to several communities of color, the CSEC, Southeast Seattle Education Coalition, El Centro de la Raza, and through those two, we sat down and had a conversation about where do we see the same issues, what are our goals around education, and we connected on a couple issues, and racial equity was definitely one of them, but we also saw that in our members. We had been out in about 80 buildings, and we had over 2,000 one-to-one conversations, and in every building it was about equity. Equity looked different in each building. Each building talked about equity very differently. It definitely wasn't the same definition, but we brought that big issue to the 40-person bargaining team. They then sorted it out and came up with kind of the direction that SEA would continually go in. So we had some support going into the bargain from from the community. And we put the right issues out at the right time. We knew there was a parent group that Jesse was actually involved in for fighting for recess. So who here remembers recess? Right? Everybody remembers recess. That was an issue that tugged at everybody's heart and could really relate to it. Part of the bargaining team had gone down to Columbia City during their big parade, and that's how we talk to people. It's like, tell us a story about recess. Well, the district's trying to take away recess, and they're like, no way. So that was the start of it, and we knew all of our members. There was a big concern around equity and the equities in school, and that helped coalesce us as a union ourselves, but also bring in community people. Soup for Teachers formed out of that, and they were extremely helpful on the line, but I'm not sure if people know this, they actually brought the bargaining team food 5 or 6 times. So, and we had gone from years and years of a 12-person team into this, in 2015, a 40-person bargaining team. And so there was enough food for 40 people, and parents would bring it in, and they're like, do not share this with the district. And we're like, nope, no soup for you, right? So it was really an amazing time where the community really coalesced around us, and we felt the power from the community. Letters and emails and things that were on the news. After I came out of the fog after that strike, watching some of the news clips where even kids were feeling the solidarity and the importance of treating educators right. So it was a big movement for Seattle. And we still kind of ride some of that from the 2015 strike, ride some of that energy and that power, which is great. The other thing that we've experienced in Seattle is last May, we decided to, around funding and the budget, was do an Occupy Olympia. And there wasn't a whole lot of people that came down at once, but different locals around the state, different EAs, education associations, came down, and we actually had, in a 3-week period, we had a group of either 25, anywhere from 25 to 100 people there each day for 3 weeks solid. And so we had 56 different locals, WEA locals come down. And that was a big movement for us, having that solidarity and really working together. And that made us closer as an EA. So that was another excellent way of coming together. We also had some Ask Me come down for Occupy Olympia. So there was different unions that would maybe send 1 or 2 people. So that was another step in the right direction of us coming together. And then, of course, was the bus strike not too long ago, where we voted to do a half-day walkout in solidarity of the Teamsters 174, the bus drivers. And we really feel like the bus drivers are a part of our family. They are the first people our kids see in the morning. We want them healthy, happy, and ready to build that relationship. Because if they have a bad ride into school, we're going to pay for it for the rest of the day. So we came together. We had, our members truly wanted to support them. So we did a strike fund. They were like, wow, this is great. They had gone out on one day. And then we did the strike vote, the solidarity walkout vote. And we had the most number of people vote we've ever had to vote in our own union. And we had a 93% yes on that. So it was a huge movement for us. And then we actually went out, and we had over 1,500 people somewhere in the city. We had 5 different sites, and the Teamsters were ecstatic. The bus drivers were so happy. If you see some of the pictures, it's always like an educator and a bus driver walking the line together and big smiles on their face. And some of the stories were just amazing. So that's another story of coming together. The bus drivers, the Teamsters, actually got health insurance that they could afford. So they only can work so many hours. So what first student offered them was a really expensive healthcare plan. And then they had like a $6,500 deductible on top of that, and they had no retirement. So it was impossible for a part-time person to afford the insurance. So they came back with a much better health insurance plan. They got retirement, they got a raise, and in 3 years, they can put their families on their insurance plan as well. So I actually was texting teachers to see if they could come here, and they're like, we're really sorry, but Teamsters love teachers, so we'll forever be in debt. So I'm like, we're heading towards a bargain, so I'm gonna hold you to that. But now we have a relationship, right? So it's about the relationships between unions, between EAs, and how do we all come together? Janice is gonna hit us, and we know that we are stronger together. And we see in the right to work states in Virginia how they have all come together. But it's not just education associations that need to come together, it's labor, it's everybody, it's other education associations. We're gonna need to stand strong to make it through what's happening to the whole country. So that's my piece.
Thank you, Phyllis. And now I want to welcome Peter Hasegawa. Thank you so much from King County Labor Council.
Thank you very much. So I'd just like to say, on behalf of the King County Labor Council, welcome to the Seattle Labor Temple. I'm Peter Hasegawa, the organizing director, and I want to start by recognizing the social equity educators for taking the lead in organizing this really important event. I'd also like to thank the Seattle Education Association for co-sponsoring. Part of my role at the Labor Council is to help our affiliates get ready for right to work, and I've had the opportunity to learn a little bit about right to work and how it affects workers. And I cannot help but notice that if you look at what happens as right to work is imposed state by state on new groups of workers, what those workers lose is almost the exact mirror image of what teachers are winning as they are organizing and going on strike. And I can't help but kind of juxtapose these two paths that we have before us. And I hope that we can hear more about the path that the educators in West Virginia and Oklahoma and maybe Arizona are taking. I would like to say congratulations to the educators in West Virginia and Oklahoma for what you have already accomplished. I think we in Washington have some very important lessons to learn from your experience so far. If there's anything that we can do from Seattle to support your organizing, please let us know. We would like to help if we can. We would also like to host you here. We'd like to talk more than we're going to get to today about how you have done what you've done so far. So thank you all for being here with us today. Thanks.
So I want to introduce Nicole McCormick, but before I have her come on and speak, I just got a message from Mercedes Martinez, who's the president of the Puerto Rican Teachers Union. And she has a message of solidarity for the Oklahoma teachers organizing. And so I want to read this very quickly and then move to our next speaker. She says, the Puerto Rico Teachers Federation expresses its solidarity with the Oklahoma teachers that are planning to strike effective next April 2nd, claiming a much needed pay increase. The West Virginia teachers have begun tracing the route for workers in their struggle to gain power, benefits of workers, salary increases, and strengthen public education, organization, unity, and mass mobilization. In 2008, the Puerto Rican Teachers Federation led a 10-day strike that as a result led to a 14% pay increase on all teachers' salary and a stipend signed by the Secretary of Education and our president of the union then, guaranteeing no schools in Puerto Rico would be privatized and no charters would be implemented. Up until today, 10 years later, we have stopped every government intent to privatize our schools and have no charters in Puerto Rico. However, these corporate moguls, corporate reformers, and corrupt politicians struck back in February this year after we were hit by a Category 5 hurricane just 6 months ago and presented a bill into the legislature to establish charters, schools, and vouchers. This capitalist neoliberal agenda was approved, signed by the governor, and converted into law this past Thursday, March 29, 2018. Teachers in Puerto Rico have been organizing themselves since And we know they want to convert Puerto Rico into the New Orleans of this decade. We have had a one-day strike last March 16th, led by different teachers unions, including the Teachers Federation of Puerto Rico, where more than 16,000 teachers were absent from school, representing 50% of the teachers in our county, followed by a march on last March 24th with parents of special education children who will be the victims of this assault on public education. We are facing the biggest attack ever, with the announcement as well of 300 school closures and 7,000 layoffs. It's the shock doctrine and disaster capitalism in full motion. Therefore, we are organizing for an indefinite strike beginning at the end of April. If their attack is big, bigger will be our response. With this certainty, such that you will triumph, we will too. Our love, support, and solidarity with teachers of Oklahoma and around the world who are fighting against the ruling 1% that want to leave us all in misery. We will triumph. Venceremos. So solidarity with our teacher union comrades out there in Puerto Rico. And now it's my honor to introduce Nicole McCormick, the pre-K music teacher and member of the West Virginia Education Associations from Athens, West Virginia, and Mercer County. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. It really is an honor to be invited to be part of this. Can you guys hear me okay?
We can. Thank you. Sounds great.
Okay. Well, I'll just try to go through some of the things that I thought would be important to others. So first, talking about how it spread from 3 to 55 counties. Back in 1990, whenever that we had our first original big strike, it began in southern West Virginia, which is where the coal fields are. And Wyoming County, West Virginia began. They were the first ones to walk out, and they were the first ones this time too. And it really probably started about 3 years ago, honestly. Our income, our yearly increases haven't kept up with inflation, and our healthcare costs have become so outrageous that everyone has taken a pay cut the last 3 years. So whenever that PEIA, which is the Public Employees Insurance Agency that we are all covered under as public employees in West Virginia, and there are no other options, that's the insurance that you take. So whenever they rolled out their new ways that they were going to get their money, instead of our state legislature funding it so that it wouldn't come off the backs of the workers, they didn't, and they haven't for quite some time. So for example, my family, my husband teaches as well, and we have 3 biological children and a child we adopted through the West Virginia foster care system. So there's 6 people in our home. And with the proposed increases, it would have been an extra $300 a month, would have meant to us that we would have been living on like $10 a day after our bills were paid for a family of 6. And that was supposed to be, because my babies are infants. So that would have been diapers and food. And it's even worse for service professionals. I've been teaching for 9 years, and I have a master's degree, and I just broke 40,000 last year. But a starting head cook in southern West Virginia makes about $19,000 a year. So if they are both public employees, there is no other option for insurance, and destitution is a fact of life. So taking this into account, our southern counties are typically our poorest counties. And so it would have been a big leap of faith for Wyoming families to walk out. With the closure of a lot of the mines and a lot of the things associated with that, a lot of those homes are probably single income homes. And I guess that the desperation became too much, And so I remember talking to friends from Wyoming County, and they said, we're going to take a walk. And they did. And they walked out. And I think that gave everyone else the courage and the boldness to follow suit. So it spread from the bottom up, and it spread from the individual members and non-members up to the state making the decision to take a vote to do statewide action. So in each of our counties, because we're a small state population-wise, but in my county, for example, Mercer County, which is a neighbor to Wyoming, we have about 600 teachers in our county, and about 500 of them belong to the West Virginia Education Association, and we have probably about 3 that are AFT, the American Federation of Teachers. And we also have a service personnel organization called the WVSSPA, and we never really communicated with each other because they compete for members. So you don't have to belong to an organization. So it was kind of always this competition of, how are we going to get more members than you have, and kind of have that power type of thing. So starting to communicate with those people from the different organizations in person was absolutely vital. And, I have to give a huge shout out to our service professionals, because if it hadn't been for them, we may have been able to have school a few days. If it hadn't been for the bus drivers saying no and the cook saying no, there may have been enough teachers willing to walk in that building that we could have had school. So they really saved us. They really kept those schools closed down. And talking about, and I'm just kind of going through a list of things, and feel free to think of questions later if I miss something. But a way to build trust and confidence that, we were going to make it through this, because, nobody has money to put back for savings. So we were fortunate it was around tax time. So some of us were able to put back our income taxes, but that wasn't the case for everybody. We really worked with our school boards, which kind of surprised me that they were so on board. But our problems are their problems. If they can't retain teachers and service professionals, then they can't do their jobs. So reaching out to them and having them say, we're on your side, we are not looking to file injunctions. We had meetings where that we would invite everyone, members and non-members, as long as they were an employee, and our county superintendent came and spoke, and she said just as much. She said, I'm legally obligated to do certain things, but we want you to know that we understand your struggle. But nothing ever came of that, because I think that they realized as a state and as a county that when you have 727 vacancies, and it has increased every year, of classrooms that aren't filled with certified teachers, that they're desperate too. We're desperate to live, and they're desperate to keep their schools alive and to keep their children taught. So working with them gave a lot of people confidence, and also just having those conversations in person, especially with service professionals who were worried that they would be easier to replace, and saying, if they would fire you and only you, that would be discrimination against one person, and we're going to be right there with you, and it's okay. And, we're willing to walk out, and we want you to walk with us. So that really helped build confidence. So as a teacher, and speaking to teachers and people that work in public education, like was said before about solidarity, everyone loves their favorite neighborhood teacher. We have that connection because that we give so much of ourselves. We sacrifice so much of our personal lives to be able to give our students what they deserve and what they need. And I feel like that most people recognize that. Most parents, most community members recognize that we want to give them the absolute best that we can, that we we are doing our absolute best. We are taking those extra trainings. We're getting that extra education. We're spending those extra hours. We're buying those those tennis shoes. We're making sure that that kid has a winter coat, whatever it is. And so I think that that connection instantly builds support before you do anything. And so having that conversation, which can be scary, of, you know, I'm sorry, but we're not going to be in school, I think is easier when that there's already that understanding that you love their child and that you want what's best, and being able to retain and attract quality professionals is only beneficial to their child. So, talking about hurdles, things that could have been a huge issue, considering that West Virginia is, you know, more or less a right to work state, and that we don't have collective bargaining. I think the thought was, what do we have to lose? What are they going to do? They can't fill the positions already, and if they would fire all of us, they would have to hire us back because there's nobody else. So I think that understanding, and especially if you've been a teacher or you've been a service professional, you know how difficult it is to work in the school system. And you know that people that can't cut it don't stay. And that, so it takes a unique individual that's highly motivated to be able to stay. And I think that administration and state boards and county boards realize that too. And so, love you too. So I think that taking into account your worth, you know, it is our labor first, ours. And it's ours to either withhold or to give. And so, so recognizing your importance and recognizing your power is, I think, the first internal step. And then being able to communicate that with each other via Facebook pages. You know, we have a West Virginia Public Employees secret page. In September, there was probably 30 members. And yesterday, I'm one of the moderators on there. We have like 26,000 members, and there was still 600 member requests to be able to be filtered through. So talking again about solidarity, reaching out to people that are going to have similar interests as you with our public employees, because they're all on the same insurance. So finding that connection and finding that ability to communicate that gives people the boldness, the courage to move forward with action. And is there anything?
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing those lessons with us. I can't express to you how much it means that you were able to show the power of rank and file workers, and we will be studying this for a long time to come, your victory, and I hope that we can bring you out sometime soon and other workers to help us learn those lessons. So thank you so much. I now want to introduce Rebecca Garelli, 7th grade science and math teacher at Sevilla in West Phoenix. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. So, like everybody else, I'm very grateful for the opportunity, and I am also grateful for the folks from West Virginia and Oklahoma, because I have been camped out on your Facebook page for a very long time. So thanks for letting me in and learning the ropes myself. So I thought for our story, I'd kind of break it into 3 parts. So I'll kind of explain the issues, and then maybe talk about the successes we've had so far, and then the challenges. So I hope everybody's cool with that agenda. So the issues here in Arizona, we are basically Koch brothers ground zero. So we are literally full of charter schools, full of vouchers. A large chunk of our public education funding goes to basically, they're called STO, student tuition organization, basically tax credits, kind of a voucher system. So a large chunk of our public funding is just funneled somewhere else, and kids can go and have school choice. So that's what our governor's behind. He's like the champion of school choice. So we have that to combat, on top of being 50th in pay for elementary school teachers. We are 48th in per pupil funding, and also 48th for student teacher ratios, and the ratio for counselors is right down there as well. We have some schools that have, I mean, I know where I'm at, we have one counselor for 1,200 kids. So there's a lot of things we're kind of combating down here, but definitely funding in general. So what happened during the recession in 2008, we lost $1.5 billion in funding. And that has not been restored. We are still missing $1.1 billion. So that's quite significant. And what that looks like for teachers is a pay freeze for about 10 years. So again, just like your stories, we have people with master's degrees, highly qualified, and barely making $40,000. And insurance is incredibly high. So those are on top of the class sizes being enormous, and we don't have enough substitute teachers. So we have these things called split classes, which I didn't even know existed until I moved here in July. I'm from Chicago, former Chicago Teachers Union, and was part of the 2012 teacher strike in Chicago. So. So with that, I feel like I bring a lot of experience and knowledge to the table, and I also have a whole bunch of friends I could call upon if we need some support, which I have done, and they've lended a hand once or twice so far. So thanks to them for that. So, I mean, you can see all the issues Arizona's facing. And so basically how this movement started was a Facebook page and a Twitter conversation. Twitter is what kind of sparked the Red for Ed movement. I'm sure you've seen that. And then the Facebook page that now has 38,000 members is where we pretty much organize everything. So social media has been one of our successes, right? That's our platform to organize. We can communicate to the masses. We have created some hashtags that are becoming quite powerful. And we've done some Twitter campaigns, combating what the governor says, and he's putting out some $1 million ads that says everything's fine in education in Arizona. So we've kind of Twitter campaigned that and got a couple of those ads pulled off the, off the wires. So that's been a success. We are only 4 weeks young. We are working at hyper speed. Within a week, we had a highly structured organizational chart. We divided up into teams. We had 9 people who stepped up. I am one of them. I'm kind of the action support leader. So kind of fell into that position because of my prior experience with the Chicago Teachers Union. So we've kind of got our group. We have created a communication system where we have school liaisons, which if we were a union would be called delegates, but we're not. So we've got 800 liaisons so far. So that means 800 schools have somebody that can disseminate information to all the teachers and counselors, et cetera, all the members. So we feel like that system is working pretty well. We had a couple protests so far. We have created statewide community building events, right? So we created this campaign for Paint the State Red for Ed, where we get together across the state. Any rank and file member can basically just get up, set an event, say, hey, I'm going to be at the park. I'm going to be at the community center. Come on down. I want to tell you about what we're fighting for. Let's make some posters together. Let's paint our cars, hashtag Red for Ed. And that's basically growing. I was just at the grocery store a little bit ago, and I saw a couple cars in the grocery, parking lot painted Red for Ed. So that means it's working. We are gaining community support. We also have a parent Facebook page where we can get some allies and some friends to help us support. And where we had a big rally on Wednesday night where we announced our demands to the governor. So we are now waiting to see what happens. The ball is in his court, and they're in legislative session for a few more weeks. So we're kind of, disseminating information and figuring out a timeline of the most effective way to play this game. But in the meantime, while we're waiting, we're not going to sit back, right? We're going to gain this momentum. We're going to continue. We're now, this week, we're doing walk-ins. So we're building our communities. We're inviting not only our staff, but if parents want to join us, and just kind of do that solidarity walk-in sort of thing where we can do some informational picketing, provide some flyers, that kind of thing. And I've seen leaders popping up all over the place statewide saying, here's what I'm doing at my school. Here's what I'm doing at my school. So it's really catching on, and I feel like people are starting to gain momentum. So I'm really proud of what we're doing in that arena. As far as challenges, it's a right to work state, right? So we're in the same ball game as you guys. And combating fear is one of the biggest challenges, right? I am struggling very much because my mindset is that of a Chicagoan, and I'm used to having a strong backing, and that's not existent here. It's a little bit different, right? People look at the EA as not as a fully strong force. It's gaining momentum now, and they're actually, our Arizona Education Association is kind of a parallel partner with us right now, and it's a wonderful relationship. So that's a really positive thing for us, but we don't have this sense of unity, this solidarity, right? So people are just afraid. Am I going to lose my credentials? Am I going to lose my job? I had people afraid to paint their cars thinking something could happen to them. So that's a mindset and a political kind of culture that you have to figure out a way to, help people understand their rights, I think is what is real necessary here. And to really show people their power, like you had just said, is people don't know their power. They think they don't have any. And so we really need to change that mindset if we're really going to do something major, which we are. So we are in the midst of, really building that solidarity piece and just changing that mindset a little bit and saying, we do have the power and we can do something. We don't have to sit in the shadows anymore. So I think that's pretty much the gist of what's going on here. We're gaining momentum, and I hope it continues. We haven't set a strike date yet. We're still kind of, waiting to see what the governor says before we play the next chess move, basically.
I hope I have a feeling the next move is going to be checkmate. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Rebecca. We wish you all the best. And I'm now really honored to be able to introduce Larry Cagle. Sorry for mispronouncing your name earlier. A high school English teacher from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and founder of Oklahoma Teachers United. Thanks so much for being here with us. Give them a warm round of
It is, Washington, it is a great honor to be able to speak to you. I am looking forward to coming to you guys this summer. I've got some continuing ed, and I looked across at the options for me. Washington was on the list, and I thought, oh yeah, I'm totally going there. Totally going to do that. All right. I wanted to say, Peter, Phyllis, and Tracy, thank you very much for participating in the panel. Hearing your voices, hearing your stories really does help me. I'm sure it has the same reaction to Nicole and Rebecca. I wanted to also say thank you for this movement about naming our independent protest groups as Educators United. Oklahoma was one of the first to stick with the name Oklahoma Teachers United. I noticed Arizona switched it to Educators United. We're totally going to switch to Educators. Absolutely. That's a much, much better name. As the independent movement grows, I do think that we need to figure out in what small ways can we unite. And in those small ways, create these huge waves, which is the story for myself and the teachers in Oklahoma. Everything in these protest movements start in one spot with one person, and then 2, then 3, then suddenly 100, and then 1,000. Our story started with me and Mickey Miller, a teacher who agreed to meet with me at a Starbucks for coffee and finally lay out what we felt was true in our hearts, that we had to do something. We had to try something. Our protest started really simple. We would encourage our fellow teachers to call in sick all at the same time in groups of 6 and 8. And in doing so, create havoc in the school. The reason we wanted to do this was we knew that we couldn't just announce a walkout. We just did not have that kind of confidence. So we would call in small groups and create havoc. And in doing so, we would bring attention to our plight. We involved the media at every step. We told them in advance what we were going to do. And of course, they were more than happy to report it. And then once we had done it, we called them up and we had them report it, which they were more than happy to do. It didn't take long before we had over 100 schools calling us and reaching out and saying, hey, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? And how does it work? And so we had a little secret group. So we started a little Facebook group. And we had to give ourselves a name, and we gave ourselves Oklahoma Teachers United. And we ran under the wire. We were completely afraid to come out of the closet and say, this is who we are, and this is what we want. We just didn't feel like we were big enough yet. And so our second step was to encourage students who by then knew what was going on. They knew that they were spending time in the cafeteria and time in the auditoriums because teachers had had it. Teachers were tired of watching beloved teachers move to Arizona, move to Arkansas, move to Texas, move anywhere out of the state of Oklahoma. They were tired of seeing good teachers retire early. They were tired of seeing teachers switch careers completely. This is a story that repeats itself over and over. And so the students were eager. We were shocked. I mean, you can't get a teenager to clean their room on their own, much less develop a protest group. So there they did. There they were. There were students for the very first time standing up and finding the courage to walk out. And so we thought if students could do it, we could do it. So we agreed to meet, about 50 of us. And it was a lot of gall at that moment, you know, in hindsight, to think that we had the courage to do it. There are 42,000 teachers in the state of Oklahoma. Only 12,000 are members of the Oklahoma Education Association. Only 2,600 of them are members of the AFT. And there's another 2,000 members of OPEA. And that union size was so small, we were frightened. What will people say? I mean, we were half union members, half not union members. But we knew that the time had come to stop running our protests on the backs of children. We had to stand up, stand out in front just like they did, announce our names, announce our schools, and find the courage. What we didn't know for sure, but we believed in our hearts, was if we stuck our neck out there, they would stand with us. And so we stuck our necks out. We got in front of the cameras and said, my name is Larry Cagle. My name is Heather Reed. And this is where we teach. And in a week from now, we're going to come back and announce a date. Would you join us? Would you meet with us? And let's vote. If the superintendents want to, or the union wants to, you can get out in front of us. If you don't, you will be following us. And so we picked a date and off we went. And we woke up the next morning, and to our astonishment, our little Facebook group that was running private, about 2,000 members, suddenly blew up to 8,000 participants. We had over 10,000 messages across the state, across the country, across the world, with people saying, we believe in you, don't you give up. And behind all of that, Nicole, was West Virginia. And I can't begin to tell you how much the love we got from West Virginia gave me the courage that day, that Saturday. The Friday we announced, that Saturday I woke up, and there were literally hundreds and hundreds of messages from West Virginia. And it really did feel like that moment in the movie Jerry Maguire, you know, where he's been fired and he stands up in front of everybody and he says, I am going to stand behind what I believe and who's with me. And there is just, you know, one poor soul. It did feel like that as I drove back from Oklahoma City to Tulsa. I had this moment where I thought, holy shit, I've got to get the memo back. I've got to figure out how to get the memo back. I have just said something and I can't, there's no sound. And then I went to bed, and then there was West Virginia. And West Virginia was the savior to Jerry Maguire. And from there, we knew we had it. We knew that there was something to run with. So we even got more gall at that moment. We called every single superintendent and school board member we could hustle up. And we messaged out to everybody we knew, and we threatened our school board, our superintendents, and our union. We will make a vote on Wednesday with or without you. We would prefer you in front. And they said, stand down. We're going to have an emergency meeting on Sunday. And they did. They had an emergency meeting, and we were beside ourselves with joy. Oh, my God, can you believe this is actually happening? And the superintendents and they all got together, and they came up with this plan, and they announced it on Monday. And to our shock and horror, they decided that we would walk out on April 23rd. April 23rd, 3 weeks before the end of school. And we knew, right then and there, we knew we had been hoodwinked. We knew that we had been handed a raw plan that would not win, that we would have failed. And so we had to do something we really did not even think would have to happen. I mean, it just didn't occur to us. We threatened the union that we would go without them, and this time we meant business. Wednesday, in 2 days, we would protest without them. And they said, they hung up the phone on us. They absolutely said we were ridiculous, that the 3 weeks that we protested would absolutely convince legislators to change their mind, which we now know was a lie, was an absolute lie. I mean, I hate to say it because they are my union, but to pick a date 3 weeks before the end of the school is a way to absolutely lie to the rank and file about your commitment to the strike. That's a fact. And so, union and non-union, we decided in a last-ditch rush. 100 schools went door to door, hall to hall, and got lists of names of teachers who would walk with us. We had them write it down, and then the last stop we made was the site union supervisor, or the union rep. And we showed him the list of the names, and we said, by the way, with or without you, we're going. And they made 100 phone calls back to the OEA and to the AFT and said, holy shit, they're going to walk without us. And so on the Wednesday that followed, the union at 2 o'clock went on the news and said, we've heard you loud and clear. We will change the date to April 2nd. And that's this coming month. That's our history. That's our story. And our story is one of two things. One, we are in the middle of what we call a referendum. The state of Oklahoma is deciding for itself now. Teachers are behind it, and we've dragged the state employees into the fight with us. We have decided it's time to make a decision about whether we will or will not fund our public services. You can say no, if that's your will, but you will not do so without a fight. We're going to drag you into this referendum, and you're going to decide, do I want my children to have schools that are well funded? Do I want my children to go to schools that are world-class competitive, or am I going to continue down this path that we know has got failure written all over it? We also know that when this fight is over, that we will move from referendum to reformation. The unions have gotten weak. And I let this be a message to those of you who are union strong as I am. Do not misread what's happening in Oklahoma as a protest against unions. It is a protest against becoming complacent. Look, there's nothing any of us can do about right to work. It has taken its toll on Oklahoma. That's their story, and there's no getting out of it. And there's no going back. I mean, Oklahoma will not turn around and change and become a right to unionize state. That simply isn't going to happen. But what we've shown is if teachers, if workers, if employees unite, they can change the trajectory of politics in their state. And so what I want to say to you is, don't you be afraid of a right to work change. You just be afraid of anybody in the union who becomes complacent and you replace them. The unions have to find their place in this world, and there is a place. I am sure of it. I found it. And so there will be a reformation in Oklahoma where we go from union to union and we make it clear, if you can't build, you get out of our way, because we know how to and we will do it. And so I encourage you, union leaders out there, you look at Oklahoma, you look at Arizona, two states that are clearly, like you called it, Arizona, we are the grassroots element of a conservative movement to destroy unions entirely. And what we found is that we can push back, we can fight back, and we can unite as workers in a union. But it cannot happen if the union does not want to listen to the rank and file. It is clear as day to me that in Oklahoma, our union didn't want to hear it. They wanted to have it their way. If you're going to lead, you darn sure better know who you are leading. And in Oklahoma, there are 30,000 non-union members who we intend in the Reformation to make union due-paying members of the state. Moving on, I want to talk a little bit briefly about, something that was different for us, Arizona, something that's different for us in Arizona, and that is that we lost control of the media. One of the things that we didn't plan on was groups popping up, looking identical to us, who had absolutely no grassroots movement at all. And they garnished thousands and thousands, tens and tens of thousands of followers. But ultimately, we realized that they were actually not interested in the protests. They were just interested in the media. They weren't interested in grassroots organizing. They were simply interested in doing interviews. And we've got to be careful of this. Well, and I'm speaking as a non-millennial who's learning Facebook and Twitter as fast as I possibly can. That the world out there knows how to maneuver in that world, and we had better learn how to do it. The Monday is fast approaching. We don't see Monday as our big day, quite frankly. It's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. One day there will be a big protest. But Oklahoma's learned hard and fast. 3 years ago, we went 50,000 hard, and we all went to the Capitol and we protested. And the next week, the state raised our insurance rates. There's no way. We can't wait on Monday. Monday's going to come and it's going to look great in the media, and then the national news is going to take off and go away. It will be Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday that we have to fight. And our fight shouldn't be with legislators. You let them figure this out. They'll get it in time. Our fight is with elected school board members and superintendents and union members. Do not think for a minute that at the local level you can't have impact. That's where we have our state by the short hairs, because our parents and our students and our teachers have gotten a hold of their school board members and made it perfectly clear we will not back down. And if you dare pull us back into school, we will be in your office in the hundreds. That's our attack strategy. Look, legislators will fall. They know darn well that this movement cannot be quieted easily. And that's why they were quick to create what they referred to as a historic vote. It was a historic bunch of crap is what it was. That vote was underfunded. It had not even half of what we had asked for. So it may have been historic that both sides voted for it, but it was not historic in the sense that it met the needs of the protesters who were out there. Our future, just like you, Tracy, and I hope that you and I will get a chance to work together at some point in the future. We're very concerned about the privatization of our schools. That's very scary to us. We're also interested in the wasteful funding. The state of Oklahoma has 77 counties, but it has 132 school districts. 132 school districts in 77 counties. We are beginning to look at those as the Taliban. They've got their little groups, their little villages of control that make no sense at all. How can you have How can you have one county like Tulsa County and have three different school boards? Each one of those school board has a superintendent making over $200,000 a year. Of course, people are mad. But one of the last things I wanted to say before I get off the phone here with you is that I think, at least for me in Oklahoma, that while I understand that there are politics at play here, that this is not a political issue. And I'm stunned by that. I'm absolutely stunned by it. As I've done town hall meetings across the state trying to unite teachers in their respective districts, I've found conservatives, I found liberals, I found socialists, I found all walks of political life out there. And one thing is united. We all want our kids to go to schools that have been thoroughly funded. We want good teachers, not average teachers. We want good teachers. I was today getting my tires fixed, and in the tire shop, there was a man who was absolutely in love with Donald Trump. And so I was not at all surprised because I've been hearing it over and over again. He was completely behind the teacher strike. He wanted to make sure that I understood that he wanted his grandkids to go to good schools. Now, look, if conservatives can do that and liberals can do that, I think we ought to be careful on the walk that we make, that we don't alienate and create lines in politics. I think we unite under an idea that all people, and I do think that in West Virginia, you can relate to this. I mean, we saw that West Virginia voted for not Trump first, voted for brain cramp. Not him. Say it.
Bernie?
Yeah. Bernie Sanders.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Saving the teacher. Yes, West Virginia voted for Bernie Sanders and then turned around and voted for Donald Trump. Look, people in this country are looking for change and they're looking for something unique. They just went from one extreme to another extreme because what they were looking for is a solution. Working class people in this country want a solution. Working class people are wanting to unionize. They are. We shouldn't be afraid of that. We should be excited by that. Whether it's Bernie or Trump, I don't care what your politics are. We want working class people to have wages like they used to have. And that is not a political statement. That is something the entire country is willing to get behind us on. And I want to say again, thank you. I'm really excited about what's happening in Oklahoma. It is a battle every day. It is superintendents constantly cowarding to political pressure. It is school board members dodging phone calls and emails. It's legislators acting like, they've never seen this sort of thing before. And it's teachers frightened that they're going to fire us, as if they could possibly do that, as if they could. No, they cannot fire us. But we do have the upper hand. We have the strength. We just have to work at it every day with all of our passion. Thank you, Washington, for letting me come on and talk for as long as I did. I hope I didn't bore you. Keep an eye on us. We've certainly been excited by your participation.
Right on. Thank you, Larry. Solidarity! Good luck with your struggle. Thank you so much for sharing those lessons. We have some time now to take a few questions. So if people have burning questions, they should reach out to Roberta, who's got some note cards, and she'll get those. Before we get to some of the questions we have, there's a list of things that people can do to support Oklahoma that we want to put up on the screen for everybody to see. You can take a picture of the screen or write down some things that you can do to support this struggle that's about to erupt and change the course of the labor movement. And we want to be there step by step with you. The Pizza Solidarity Fund for Strikers at the Capitol, please go to that website. Support Oklahoma Teachers United with a donation. Send solidarity by signing this petition. Get your union to pass a solidarity resolution, and on April 2nd, take a group picture in your union shirt with coworkers or strike supporters and send them to the Oklahoma Teachers United Facebook page. So I hope everyone will join me in doing those solidarity actions. I have a couple of questions that I want to start off with first. And I just want to begin by asking, we just put up a list of ways to support Oklahoma and Arizona in their upcoming fights. Is there anything else that we can do to support the teachers of Oklahoma and Arizona in this coming week and months?
Not that I can think of right now, but I definitely will keep that in mind.
Let us know. We'll be there.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, I from one of the things that is clear is that momentum is incredibly powerful. And so, I reach back to West Virginia and the effect that it had on us. I really cannot understate that. When we waffle, and it's really fascinating. So Arizona, I would very much love to see you guys open your Facebook up a little bit to that kind of reaction, because our Facebook group is open. Anybody can come on to Oklahoma Teachers United. We do have a team of 4 people monitoring it all the time, because, just like anybody else, we get our share of crazies and we got to kick them out. And sometimes the arguments or discussions get sidetracked, and we try and pull them in and work it. But what's really fascinating to me is the number of times, and it happens still, the number of times West Virginia says, when we start talking passionately about something, there have to have been 10,000 touches by West Virginia in the last 30 days. And I am not making that number up. And the impact of that on our group is so positive. You can sense it. People who start complaining and getting negative get a West Virginia message that says, don't give up, stay together, remember solidarity. And it starts, people cool it off. It chills it out. It's almost like my own little editing group right there from West Virginia. So if there's anything you could do, is you do follow the protests. You read those news stories that are coming across our Facebook group and encourage us. Keep our dialogue in solidarity and unity. So I would hope Arizona would do that at some point.
I was just going to jump in and say, I can't believe I didn't even think about that, because even this week after our rally and how it became national news, we have little cyber ninjas in there coming from West Virginia and Oklahoma, and I don't have to sit here and read all the comments, combat them myself. We have we have like a mod squad, a moderator team that kind of, filters through that kind of stuff. So I definitely agree with you that it really helps build momentum and build solidarity. So if anybody wants to get on our group, definitely. We haven't turned anybody away. Honestly, it says closed group, but the minute you request, we let you in. Oh, come on. We need cyber ninjas. Seriously. We need comment combaters, basically, to, keep that power and awareness. People don't aware how powerful they can be unless they hear it from someone who has that experience. So I agree with you there. We definitely could use that. So thank you for saying that.
Thank you so much. Another question that people are curious about is for West Virginia, and we want to ask Nicole about how the strike spread from the initial 3 counties that went out to all 55 counties, I believe it was. What did that look like? How did it go from that initial few counties to spread across the entire state?
I think that maybe we started having those hearings for the insurance in October and November, and people started openly saying the word strike in December. And so then when those first few counties, Wyoming and Logan and Mingo maybe, decided that they were going to walk out, I think that started the discussion of, we need to walk out too. And so with the help of the Facebook page and with some of the structure of the union that was already there, we were able to communicate with each other and have those phone calls and conversations. And, non-members were included in everything as well. Because we couldn't have done it without the non-members. They were equally important. So just having those conversations and saying, you know, we can do this, we can go out, and then just reaching out to our superintendent of our county and saying, we're not going to be at work this day. And most of the time they were willing to go ahead and cancel school. There was only a couple of days that we had to speak directly to our building administrator and let them know that we weren't going to be there. But as Rebecca was saying, and Larry too, you know, there aren't enough substitutes. There aren't enough people to fill in. So whenever you have on a regular day, whenever that you have more than a few people missing in a building, you know, it shuts it down anyways. So I think that understanding and that recognition of the situation and your power helped that move along. So really it was just conversations, and it was saying, well, what are we going to do? And so we had walk-ins where we signed with, we brought signs and things before our work day. We had days where we just met up at, you know, the local fountain or here or there and held signs and handed out information. We had like town hall type things in our local counties, and we encouraged everyone to have that. We said, hey, invite your elected representatives, and let's have discussions about how they think they can address issues and what we think the issues are. So really communication is the big one, and use any means you have. If you know that someone on your first grade team of 4 or 5 teachers is confident and well-spoken, make them the captain of those few teachers and say, hey, would you be willing to get information to them and give information back to us if there's an issue, a question, a concern, an idea?
Excellent. Thank you so much. There's a question about school lunch during the strike, and could you talk about building connections with families and what plans are there to help families and kids during the strike? There was a comment that Adina Burnett was here in Seattle last weekend with SCIU leaders that was very inspiring to talk about the huge effort that went into feeding kids during the strike in West Virginia.
Right. And actually, I know Adina, but we have a lot of issues, and a lot of that stems from drugs and poverty. And, you know, they kind of facilitate each other. So we already have some programs like all of our children in Mercer County get free breakfast and free lunch every day. And we also have some churches that have banded together, and they do something called Blessings in a Backpack. And so children that we know have food insecurity, they get sent home with bags of things that they can prepare. So if there is not an adult in the home, if the adult is not conscious, whatever the issue might be, that they can prepare food for themselves and their younger siblings. And so that was already in play. And the way we did it locally is I remember us having a conversation, and a teacher said, I don't know if I can leave knowing that those kids aren't going to eat. And I was like, well, we need to leave, so we need to figure out a solution. So we just started calling around to local churches and social groups and said, hey, would you be willing to sponsor a meal on this day? Would you be willing to do this? And literally that's all it takes. Make a phone call, speak to someone, say, hey, do you mind if I drop by? Talk to them for 5 minutes and say, this is what we need. How can you help? Because people are willing to help. And so, like, I live in the town of Athens. It's a very small town. There's a little university here. And we had 2 churches that worked together, and they alternated. And not only did they provide hot meals for children, but they invited their families as well. And so, you know, the parents weren't sitting outside while their kids were eating. They said, you know, hey, this church on this day, and we published that information on our Facebook pages, and we spoke with the media. You know, we tried to make sure that they were involved and aware. We had a local recreation center that offered free childcare, and all they had to do was just either call or register online. And so if you make those phone calls, if you make those connections, people will help. They want to help.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. There's another question from the audience that West Virginia educators wanted to tax natural gas and coal will Oklahoma tax the rich? Talk about how or where the funds should come from.
That's an excellent question. And it gets at the heart, I think, for a lot of people. And when you move, when you move away from this being a left or right question, and you talk about equity in a sense that it's not a black or a white or a particular religious equity, but about fairness for all Americans, this gets really easy to solve in Oklahoma. Oklahoma has a 3.2 GPT, gross production tax. That's the tax rate which we charge oil companies as they pump the oil out of our land. Everybody should understand this, right? Water belongs to everyone. Air quality belongs to everyone. Land belongs to those who invest and buy, but state and federal land belongs to all people. Oil belongs to the people. It does not belong to one person. You lease the right to have access to that, and we will tax you for your right to access that oil. Oklahoma has a 3.2% GPT. Texas has 8. That's pretty good, huh? The Dakotas, their tax rate is 12%, but our politicians have convinced Oklahoma that if we were to raise our tax rate to 7%, those oilmen would get angry and go to Texas and pay an extra % more because they're mad. I know they've dumbed down our education so long in Oklahoma, they think we'll fall for that, but that's actually not true. We're absolutely, that's when I said earlier that this is a referendum. The Democrats have pushed in a referendum in November for the November midterm elections that we will move our tax rate from 3.2 to 7, back to 7, I should say, because it was at 7 for 30 years. It was only a decade ago that we dropped it to 3.2 in hopes of incentivizing oil companies to come in. And so when I said it was a referendum, what I meant to say, or to clarify to say, was we had momentum for a strike. We had momentum for protest. And we figured if we made the protest big enough, we could force the discussion about the GPT 3.2 rate to 7 to now. And so now what we did is we just motivated the entire state to protest what the tax rate should be. So when people want to say there was a historic vote in Oklahoma, that both sides of the aisle got together, we have a very motivated Republican Party that is eager to prevent a 7% GPT. So yeah, they were more than happy to give us a 5%, but they weren't looking at the notes carefully enough. We're not going to settle for half of what we've asked. So that's an interesting question, and yes, it's going to be very important as we go forward. And I strongly encourage anybody thinking about this. You have two choices, right? You can put us back in the classroom by forcing politics down our throat, and we go back into August, some of the angriest people you've ever met. Good luck with your 7% vote in November, because I assure you we will cram it down your throat.
Okay. Yeah, here in Washington State, we don't have an income tax, and that's part of why we have the wealthiest people the world has ever known live here, like people like Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos, and it shows in the classroom, right, that we don't have the full funding for our schools that our children deserve because they're not paying their share. In fact, Amazon was just shown to pay 0% taxes, 0 for Amazon. And so that has an impact. And there's a question here for Phyllis of the Seattle Education Association. When will educators and their union in Washington follow the example of West Virginia, Oklahoma, and the others by going on strike to demand full funding for education in Washington State? If they can do it right, if they can do it in right to work states, can't we do it here? Yeah, sure. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, made little notes on this. So that's a really good question. So I talked earlier about Occupy Olympia, and there were 56 different locals that came to that. And so it really is about organizing the whole state. And when we did Occupy, we actually did a secret little group on Facebook, and how that started was a few local presidents were really frustrated with all of WEA, and we started this little group called LGSD, which is Let's Get Shit Done. And so on that Facebook page and talking to each other, that's how we organized Occupy Olympia. It was not run by WA, it was not supported by WA, it was supported by all locals. So there is still a lot of work to do in Washington State to go statewide. That was my personal goal for Occupy, was to have everybody in the state, but it just wasn't gonna happen at that point. I think there is a lot of hope that the new $2 billion that supposedly fully funded McCleary, people are looking at that in a positive light. But I think once the money comes down into the schools, we're going to find that it doesn't make a whole lot of difference in our classrooms. So that's, I think, when people around the whole state will start to get frustrated and agitated. I think with the combination of what's going to happen, what is really going to happen around when we lose agency fee, that'll be another piece that adds to it. I don't necessarily see a statewide strike happening in the next year, but there's a possibility. Governance will change in the next year. There's going to be new people coming in. There's a new board coming in. So there's a lot that we can do to build up. It is, I mean, you've heard these people, how much work this is to do, being on strike, even just with 6,000 people. It doesn't happen overnight. So there is some work that Washington State has to do to get to that point where they are completely frustrated. We have a governor that's on our side. We now have a blue Senate and House. So there needs to be more for, especially on the other side of the mountains. There needs to be more agitation for educators as a whole to walk. And I think that we experienced that in Occupy Olympia when we had, yes, it was great that 56 locals came, but there's over 200 locals that should have come. And even in the one-day walkouts in 2015, we had 60 participate in that. So there is some work to do here.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll do that one. Oh yeah, that would be great. Okay. Yeah.
So this is just an organizing question, mainly back for Nicole and Larry. So it sounds like that a really key step in the process of organizing these statewide strikes was really getting local school districts to close school at the district level. And I just want to confirm that I understood what you were saying. I'm not sure. I'm not sure that this has been really clear in the reporting that's come out nationally, and like Larry's stories about sort of starting in the building level, but really it's getting districts to see that something's going to happen and that they're going to make the decision, like they did in West Virginia, district by district, to close school. Did we hear that and understand that correctly, Nicole?
Yes. What we did is we had a meeting with members and non-members, and there was an overwhelming consensus that it was time to walk out. And so our local president made the phone call, and he said, hey, her name is Dr. Akers, so Dr. Deb, thanks. But he said, Dr. Akers, I don't think you're going to have enough people to run school tomorrow. And she said, well, I'm going to contact the board. And then school was canceled.
Got it. And did that, it sounded like part of your story was that same kind of conversation happened in a lot of different.
It did. And that also, I think that there's enough people left around still in the school systems to remember the strike of 90. And they actually tried to have school multiple days in 1990. And so people were crossing lines. And they also remember that destroyed a lot of relationships because people looked at them like scabs. And people had to switch buildings, and it caused a lot of unease and unrest and anger. And I think that the school board didn't want to deal with that. And they understood that as long as we understand that there's not enough people to come in, we can justify just going ahead and closing, and that averts all, we don't have to deal with any of that.
Got it. Thank you.
Excellent lessons. Thanks so much. I have about 3 more questions, and we have about 15 minutes, so just a time check. And I mean, as somebody who has put forward statewide resolutions to have our union go on strike, I'm really excited about the possibility and potential of doing it in a state like ours that also ranks 44 in teacher pay when adjusted for inflation. And I'm excited to see what we can do on the local level to push for it, what we can do to try to push at the state level to bring about something that, if it happened in right to work states, it seems that it's an example that can push us all forward. And one of the questions that came in was about how to reach the rural sections of the state, because I think that's something that Phyllis raised as well. And so in Oklahoma, I understand that around 80% of the population lives in Oklahoma City and in Tulsa. And so what have you done how did you reach out to the rest of the state?
Yeah, I knew early on that, it didn't take long to study the politics to understand how this would play out, right? Vast majority of people live in Tulsa and Oklahoma City. But politics for Oklahoma, both in the legislature and the politics of the school system, live in the rural communities, these far reaches of Oklahoma. And it's incredibly dysfunctional, which is why we refer to it as the Taliban. We have small communities of 2,000, 3,000 people with a superintendent. And they pay that superintendent exceptionally well to protect that identity of that community. They're afraid of losing their school. As many have seen across these small rural communities, it's not unusual to steal away their small town school. And that is the last remnant for many of these towns that gives them their identity, my church and my school. So we really understood that to be a problem for us. And it was, I challenged the unions to think this through. We went on a road tour and just made sure that we hit as many of those towns as we could. This was myself and a slew of other teachers volunteered to pick out parts of the state, reach out to them, ask for permission to use their churches or ask permission to use their libraries. Yeah, that's the other thing. You've got a really big town when they've got a big church and they've got a library. And those are towns where you can really use for activism. So we went and we met them in their library and their small towns. And look, it didn't come without some pushback. When I went out to Guyman, there were maybe 30 teachers there, and none of them were union members. But there were two oilmen who stood in the back and gave me a hard time right off the bat. And so I imagine in a community like that, those two oilmen in the back, these two roughers, as we call them, these two roughers sitting in the back probably were told by their big oil manager, hey, there's a union buster coming into town and he's meeting with teachers. And if they get what they want, they're going to close up these wells because they're going to jack up that price of that oil. So these two union boys come in the back and they start giving me a hard time. And eventually they leave. And I explained to the teachers, I said, do you understand that we actually see the same thing he does? But they just don't understand that we want what they want. They've just misunderstood the politics. They've been played, and we've been played. I would later go out to my car that night and find my window busted in because with a rock in the back seat. So I caution you as you move off into these rural communities that they are very used to things being the way they are. And coming in as your big city slicker Tulsa self doesn't always suit everybody. So.
Hey, thank you for sharing that. I just think it's important, like the lesson that you said is that we actually go and talk to them, right? And we find out what they care about and what matters in their lives and how we can build a united movement. So thanks for sharing that. There's another question that says, what preparation did West Virginia teachers do before the strike? How does it compare to organizational structures in Arizona and the preparation there? And what about prepping students and parents? So maybe start with West Virginia and then move to Arizona.
Okay, we decided that we felt like that we needed to do a few things to show that we were, not to put on a show, but to show that we were trying to do other things than just walk out. So we decided that we were going to schedule these town halls with these legislators we decided that we were going to do these walk-ins, these demonstrations of information around town. We spoke to the media every single time we did something. We invited them along. We did lots of local interviews. We made sure that, like, you know, I'm a music teacher. I teach pre-K through 5. So I have extracurricular ensembles. I have groups that meet after the school day. And so I made sure that, like, me personally, that I reached out to them and said, hey, there could be a disruption in the schedule, but I want you to know that your child is still going to be able to perform. We'll figure this out, but I appreciate your support and you sticking with us. So a lot of that was just coming back to communication. So we wanted to show that we were willing to do other things. But Larry and Rebecca can tell you, along with anybody else that's ever had to come to a walkout or a strike, that obviously the years of lobbying and phone calls and emails has done nothing. That you have to disrupt to get their attention because they think that you're just going to roll over and take it. And so I definitely wouldn't settle for anything under the 10,000. I mean, it was a huge compromise to even accept 5%. So not to get off topic, but so whenever the governors said, oh, 1% and we can't afford anything else, it's just a bunch of lies. So don't believe it and stick together and try to push for exactly what you want.
Wow, thank you. Thank you.
So we are pretty much following that exact organizational kind of formula, but we're not there yet, right? So we are in the walk-in stage, we are in the providing information to families stage, and one crucial piece that we're trying to improve upon is trying to get superintendent, kind of like a superintendent coalition, right? So we have some superintendents that are local and say, we want in, and we know that if a walkout or a strike or whatever we're going to do, we know that we're ready to make plans for that kind of thing. So I think we're not fully there yet, but we all understand what we need to do. We're going to take care of our kids. We're going to learn from you guys. We're going to watch Oklahoma and see what happens there. And we're going to take every piece of information that we have and do it the right way. We will take care of our communities. We will give enough notice. We'll do it right. And we'll take care of our families. So I think we're not there yet. Clearly, we're talking about items like that, but again, we are waiting to hear what's going on.
Thank you so much.
Hey, can I add just one quick thing there? Because I think this is a critical component to really forcing the legislators' hands. One of the things that we were very fortunate to have happen for us was we have within Oklahoma the OK Policy Institute. It's our own little Robert Reich, if you will. Somebody who is following politics and the money enough to, when we went forward with our protests, as soon as we made our demands clear, we went to them and said, can you help us figure out how to fund this thing, how to pay for it? And in a way that opens up the doors to both the left and the right, which is one of the reasons why we got that quick rush of that, historic vote, was that they have now a blueprint. It wasn't handed to them by the left and it wasn't handed to them by the right. It was an independent group. But what it does for us is it does put us in a position to say to the entire state, this is not about money. There is a funding source. There is a way to do it. You can do it any one of these 3 versions. One is a little more conservative. One's a little bit more liberal. One's in the middle of the road. Doesn't really matter to us because we're not about politics, but there is a way to fund it. And I would reach out, if I were you, and find somebody, an organization similar to that, to help you get that dialogue in front of the state.
Thanks. One of the lessons I just heard was some build-up actions to the strike, right? Whether it was walk-ins, town hall forums, these things are really important. But I also heard that years of lobbying and emails weren't enough, right? And that we actually had to have the goal of saying, we are willing to go on strike, we're organizing to go on strike, here are the steps we'll take. If you meet our demands before that strike, great. If not, we're willing to go. So thank you for sharing that. I have a last question before we wrap up. And this says, beyond basic solidarity actions like donating to strike funds and sharing messages of support, how can unorganized workers in other industries, and I would also add other unions and workers in other unions, support organizing in our cities and in your struggles? And how did that play out in your cities? I don't know if anyone wants to take that first, West Virginia or...
Well, I can just speak briefly to how that we reached out to other organizations. And I mean, there is a big history of organized labor within the mines. You know, the mine wars and everything else. If you've never read up on it, read up on it. It's a very interesting and sometimes heartbreaking story. But we tried to reach across that line to the other organizations, to the people that weren't organized. We also had like a UE Local 170, and they were some other public sector workers. So whenever that we had our town hall in Mercer County, we made sure that every group that wanted to participate had the opportunity to do so. We were in a local like theater, and so in the lobby, we let them set up membership materials. We also made sure that they had an opportunity to speak and say whatever was specific to their cause, their plight. So I think a lot of that is just finding people that might have the connections. You know, I didn't know anything. I didn't even know the UE Local 170 existed. And whenever that we included public employees on our page, a social worker said, "Hey, I belong to this. What would you think about me reaching out to them?" And I said, "Yes, please. I didn't know anything about it." You know, and I think that they even got some more membership. And I know that we did throughout the whole thing. And I think just being open and trying to communicate the best you can. I mean, of all the days on the picket line and the thousands of people that we saw, I think I got 2 middle fingers and I got 1 counter protester. I mean, the support was overwhelming, you know, and the food and the umbrellas, and you know, one day we got sunburnt, and then the other day it was snowing and raining on us. So, you know, I think just trying to communicate and trying to find those personal connections will really facilitate working with other organizations and the non-organized people. Let them know that they're invited to the table, that they're not excluded because that they don't pay member dues, that they are equally important.
Thank you. We just have a couple minutes, and I just want to ask the speakers if they have any last thoughts before we sign off.
I just wanted to jump in real quick to make a comment on what Oklahoma said, and we have a lot of groups helping us with the statistics on where to find the money. So we are good to go. I like your idea of saying, you know, we got 3 different options and you can choose which works for you. We don't care. But we have a lot of support and a lot of people just giving us data, giving us numbers left and right. So we're pretty you know, hooked up with that and grateful for all the work that people are doing to support this cause. So good point.
Thank you.
The only thing I want to offer is, you know, back to how to get this thing off the ground. It begins with one person in one school talking to another person. You can't get in a hole. You can't start a Facebook group and think that everybody's just going to join. No, you need to talk one-on-one with somebody and then add people to the conversation. Help your own network of people build. It took us probably 6-8 months of that, you know, one-on-one talking or small group talking for me to build confidence, for them to build confidence, such that when it did happen, when it did explode, people weren't shocked. They knew it was coming. They could feel it coming, and they wanted it to happen. This really is great for us. I love you, West Virginia. I love you, Arizona. Thank you for being out there with us, so I don't feel so alone. Really do appreciate it. So do everybody else.
Right on.
The only thing I would add is to not give in. I think that as educators, we feel guilty for being away from our students. We feel like that we might be taking away from someone else, whether that be, you know, instructional time or money or whatever it is, an educational opportunity. But don't let that guilt make you go back before that you get what you really need. And it's not a want. I think that that's sometimes that even in our own mind, we think that that the things that we're asking for is a want, and it's a need, and it's not a personal failing, you know, that we can't make ends meet. We didn't do something to deserve that. If anything, we've given our life to public service, and we need more than we get. So don't give in before you're ready, and stand together and find that confidence and that passion in each other. And, you know, go back when you know that the ink is dry and it's going to happen. And even if your union says, you know, just go on back, it'll be okay. You know that years and years of them telling you one thing and you getting another is exactly what's going to happen. So be strong in each other.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you to Tracy. Thank you to Peter. Thank you to Phyllis. I want to thank Nicole and Rebecca and Larry for joining us on this panel. We have so many lessons in the fight moving forward. Something I think I'll take with me forever is Nicole saying that it's our labor, it's ours to withhold or to give. And I think we should remember that moving forward. I appreciate it, and best of luck next week, Larry. Well, that concludes our panel. After this panel, we're going to meet at the Greenleaf Vietnamese restaurant in the basement of the Labor Temple for more conversation and food. So thanks everyone for coming out today. I really appreciate it.